This work has been done as a part of the activities under one of the National Innovation Development Funds in Kazakhstan, Tech Garden, techgarden.kz. It was formed over 4 years ago, and the mission was to redirect some of the extractive sector's liabilities for R&D onto innovation projects. So definitely Industry 4.0 became one of those targets. And in this talk we'll examine what we were able to achieve and what are the barriers we faced, and just look holistically what's the industry issues today and how do we take all the positive moments and opportunities that exist not only in Kazakhstan but in the region, in the economic belt, and how redirect all that into more of a sustainable model for innovation development. So in terms of when we started this fund, it has its own law. It allows, it allows the fund to do things that many other organizations are not capable of doing, such as create joint ventures with multinational companies, create venture funds that reside in a foreign jurisdiction to support all the development. So Industry 4.0, as you might have heard, it's pretty much at the beginning of the process. If you take the German model, it's quite clear, it's obvious, it's about manufacturing. If you looked in oil and gas and general extractive sectors, mining, that's where the kind of the largest opportunities for today in terms of cost cutting, efficiency, and possibly some added value. When we look at all Kazakhstan's ecosystem, it became clear that mining is the low-hanging fruit for Industry 4.0. So pretty much Kazakhstan came with the initiative that government supported activities for that Industry 4.0. And pretty much it became one of the first government kind of directed initiatives in supporting such direction. So what we've done, we looked at all the platforms. So it took us pretty much a year and a half, 2 years to do due diligence on multiple platforms and pick one of the most promising provider. This company called IntelliSense. It's a private company. It's a kind of a spin-off of a company called ARM, English ARM, that do all the chip architecture. And this is hardcore artificial intelligence. Cambridge is well known for its artificial intelligence. And fitting into the mining process, and it's not only about predictive maintenance, that's most of the artificial intelligence in the field focuses, but as well as the largest failures in the industry, like don't have to go far and don't quote me, but like GE Digital predicts it was a big failure because they couldn't adjust it properly as the more of a cut across different verticals service. It became apparent that those things should go vertical instead of being horizontal and like. So we created a joint venture that in hope to cover most of the process that happens in mining. The thing in Kazakhstan and many other countries like Chile, Africa, Australia. That's all the main mining kind of jurisdictions. You have miners do lots of other things besides mining. I'm not talking about beneficiation. I'm talking about logistics. I'm talking about power generation. And most likely they face issue of providing quality service supply to them. I mean, they have problem outsourcing. And in the developing ecosystems, it really became a problem. Of course, there are good examples where in Chile they were able to launch, this Fundación de Chile. It's a joint venture with BHP Billiton. So there is a good case of growing local small business service companies called World Class Supplier Program. They managed to, the gross revenue reached $500 million today with like around 70 companies. So it doesn't really exist in Kazakhstan, and mining companies are still forced to go abroad to find the quality service. Why? Because it's multi-million-dollar operations, lots of capex involved. Any misfortune with the solution, couple of days is going to cost you millions, tens of millions sometimes. So what we've done, we looked at the ecosystem and first of all said, let's start with mining and then trickle down to other areas like oil and gas. But there's the trick with going from mining to oil and gas, it's not about tech and different processes, it's an ownership structure. Because in Kazakhstan, mining companies, it's more of a Kazakhstani companies, they're joint ventures of course, but it's Kazakh companies. So you can work with them. Where you're going to oil and gas operations, those are, it's just operating as subsidiary. So in order to bring innovation to that subsidiary, you have to go through the headquarter. So that's the issue. And of course, we looking as well logistics. I mean, logistics is not only as a commodities logistics, but of course it's a whole Silk Road. Manufacturing, of course, it's a part of it, and energy. Energy generation, it's a big issue for a big country. So what we've done, we looked in establishing the more or less complete ecosystem. So we're looking at, first of all, incubator. At the lab, so our joint venture became a lab. We put that under the Digital Kazakhstan program as a state supported, as well as industry development program. So you have all the buy-in from the funding perspectives. And of course, we're looking at new models, such as under AIFC in terms of commodities. And we saw quite a few interesting things and where gaps could be filled. For example, if you go to any of those large trading houses, you would see that part of that transaction cost on a commodities exchange is basically storage. You have to bring and store those commodities somewhere. It amounts to up to 30% of the transaction cost. But if you use a mine as a part of that place to store, it cuts your cost 30–20%. Of course, the prerequisite, you have to use Industry 4.0 to estimate what exactly is stored and where it is and how fast you can get it, what's the quality of it, and et cetera, et cetera, and et cetera. So it's one of those parameters called provenance. So, and we started experimenting with all those things. The good thing that Kazakhstan had this initiative of, it actually was initiative of the first president that the company should spend at least 1% of their own budget on R&D. So we worked with all the majors, and for a couple of years we were able to raise 20 million for 100 projects that, you know, sometimes it's in geology, sometimes it's about environment, sometimes it's about IT systems and general digital. But we saw a kind of a gap how to reach to the Industry 4.0. First of all, it's a conservative sector. Most of the equipment dates back to sometimes 80s, 70s, and God knows how long ago, because some of those mines are old. So for those companies to get to 3.0, it's actually quite a challenge. Some of the digital infrastructure are not in place. Some of the equipment does not allow to put anything. So in our estimation, turned out of 100, it's Fraunhofer surveyed 100 plants, we saw only 14 that more or less Industry 4.0 ready. I mean, our benchmark is if the company has a ERP that digitize all the processes, that's where you start. That's a benchmark that the company at least ready, Industry 4.0 ready. So, but we were able to separate few few cases, and right now it's a really kind of success story. We took on a company called Altyn Almaz. It's a gold mining and gold refinery operations. And there was a first implementation of Industry 4.0 in Kazakhstan. When we started implementing, we faced a set of challenges. First of all, as not once been said here, human capital. It's a qualified specialist that able to work with the data analytics, artificial intelligence tools to customize that, the whole artificial intelligence platforms for particular operations. One thing about mining and general extractive sector, it's all custom, including equipment. So it's not plug and play. So you have to come, you have to analyze, you have to take the data. For Altyn Almaz, it was 1.5 years worth of data before we could make a mathematical model out of it. So with all that, it took a bit of time. It took 6 months to actually deploy artificial intelligence. Although effect was slightly staggering, and this solution just paid itself off first 4 months because of how much profit was generated, how much benefits were generated out of just milling cycle. So, but we faced another issue. It's a general, there are lots of processes. And in order to accommodate all those processes, we had to look outside of one platform and look at different solutions. And of course, it's very popular to go and use startups, but not in the conservative industry of mining. As I said, the mining companies would like to have an IBM's SLA. They make sure that the platform is there, it stays there, it's reliable. And startup, of course, cannot provide that level of neither infrastructure nor solution quality. So we ended up doing is using our labs as a platform in an attempt to pile in all the different applications and use that quality enterprise architecture to deploy some solutions. And automatically we started expanding on other sectors. One of them is one of the case in top row. It's as I said, company IntelliSense, we took a couple of startups, and one of them is currently going after Petrobras contract in Brazil and BASF United States. It's a startup, but able to get there only through enterprise quality platform. So the same we started doing with other applications in additive manufacturing, more of a materials for additive manufacturing. For digital construction, basically it's a BIM, everyone's heard, and some work with blockchain and financial services. So the same strategy being applied throughout. Of course, in the blockchain world, I mean, there are lots of different startups, but National Bank trusts IBM. I mean, that's the part of reality. That's why take IBM platform and work with that. So now, when we started working with startups, there was an obvious problem. There are not that many of them, and even less those focused on core industries from Kazakhstan's perspective. So we looked outside. And for that, as a part of First President's initiatives on five economic reforms, we launched a program called Startup Kazakhstan, basically looking at the startups starting from CIS area, like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Baltic states. We looked for new solutions. And eventually when we launched it, and let me skip this one, we were able, basically, as of now, we funded 90 startups. It just was a kind of one good pilot. And what we saw, those startups locally created 350 jobs, just full-time FTEs, out of nothing. We have not even spent $6 million for that. It's just, you know, as a seed funding, it's a small part of it. The whole portfolio now around 100 plus, close to 100 million. So it's basically lots of opportunities to grow. And now we think what to do next. And that's definitely, if we look at the region, there is a huge opportunity in terms of how many projects form in the annually at that economic belt. We estimate around 10,000. So it's, in a couple of years, it's close to at least 1 billion, just sitting there in terms of, you know, equity. Every country in the region has its own national program focused on bootstrapping and accelerating new businesses, new technological businesses. It's a big one in France, under BPI France. In Dubai, in Russian Federation, it's a Russian Startup Tour. That's how they bring all the startups from remote places and regions to Moscow under Skolkovo. There is a program in China. It's a part of Made in China. There are programs in Startup India. It's mostly to repatriate Indians from countries like United States, United Kingdom, you know, to work in India and launch businesses. And of course, Singapore and the others. So this economic belt is pretty much covered with the national programs, but there's no one overarching program that would unify all that. So one of the thoughts we're currently in discussion with the First President's Foundation is how to form a startup Silk Road. So, and currently those things are in the works. But this is a part of just initiative how to get that human capital to work for new industries, because it became clear that and that's the case with Altyn Almaz, that you can educate only so much with the existing workforce. Of course, you can go to the level of data science, but then really machine learning, it's a new age. specialists, new age of application. It's a different types of education. So it's got to be new blood in those enterprises. So that's why the startups are the best way to get that new blood. The form and shape of we've seen in different forms and modes, but sometimes startups are acquired. Sometimes it just becomes a part of the workforce, because 90% of startups, they go bankrupt. But that valuable skill, they would just go into corporate world, basically trickle. So just give you like as a food for thought. Thank you very much.